Okay, so what are you going to leave behind? It's a pretty heavy question, right? When the dust finally settles and the years have rolled by, what actually remains of the choices we're making right now? Are we talking about a legacy of, unresolved pain? Or are we building a foundation of strength, connection, and truth? Today, we're diving into how the choices made by fathers, and honestly any parental figure, ripple out across entire generations. Welcome to today's Explainer. We are setting the stage for a really fascinating journey here, moving from the heavy, heavy baggage of the past to the absolute promise of the future. We're going to look at the powerful themes of shame and reconciliation, using them as a practical guide for modern fatherhood. To do this, we'll be pulling from some incredible source material, including the indie drama film A Father's Legacy, as well as some classic literature, to uncover exactly how we can break those destructive cycles through open, honest connection. So here is our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off by unpacking the weight of fatherhood before moving into a hidden struggle a lot of people face, the burden of shame. Then we'll examine a tale of two fathers to see these concepts playing out in action. After that, we'll discover the power of reconciliation, and finally, we'll wrap the whole thing up with highly actionable steps on crafting your own legacy. All right, let's jump right into section 1, the weight of fatherhood. It is absolutely crucial to understand just how far a father's choices actually reach. When we hear the word legacy, our minds usually go straight to bank accounts, real estate, maybe a family business. But true legacy, it's so much more than material wealth. If we draw from biblical wisdom, specifically Proverbs 27, a real legacy is defined as the spiritual and moral values passed down to the next generation. It notes that the righteous lead blameless lives and their children are blessed after them. It's all about integrity, guys. It's about the emotional and moral compass you leave behind for your kids to follow. But building that kind of foundation requires deliberate focus. A father's legacy is, well, it's foundational. It doesn't just happen by accident on a random Tuesday. It requires deep intentionality. Whether we're looking at the ancient example of Abraham establishing a covenant for his family, or just a modern dad taking the time to teach his kids how to treat people with respect, the actions we take literally build the ground our children walk on. Now, I want you to take a quick second and reflect on your own familial bonds. What was your father like when you were a kid? What about your mother? Because our approach to parenting is deeply emotional and, frankly, inextricably shaped by our own pasts. Sometimes those pasts are filled with warmth, and other times, well, they're filled with voids that we spend our whole lives trying to fill. And that brings us to section 2, the burden of shame. This is a hidden struggle that dictates so many family relationships. I want you to consider this incredibly powerful quote from Jason Mack. He's the writer, director, and star of the film A Father's Legacy. In an interview about the project, he said, "I think one of the biggest killers of men is shame, because we take this thing and we shove it deep down so we never have to deal with it, but you think about it all the time and it eats away at you." That hits hard, doesn't it? Unaddressed shame is profoundly isolating, and it builds these massive walls between fathers and their children. But here's the crucial takeaway. You do not have to be perfect to leave a positive mark on the world. Actually, the core message of Mac's film is exactly this: flawed people helping flawed people. No matter how deep your shame runs, or how messed up you might think you are, you still have the capacity to impact someone's life for the better. You just have to be willing to actually face the things you've shoved deep down. To really grasp the stakes here, let's move on to section 3, a tale of two fathers. We're going to look at two starkly different father figures from our sources to highlight the ultimate power of choice. This comparison brilliantly illustrates the contrast we're talking about. On one side, we have Abner Snopes from William Faulkner's classic short story Barn Burning. Abner is this destructive, dominating force who demands blind loyalty from his family using fear and instigation. On the flip side, we have Billy Ford from the film A Father's Legacy, played by the great Tobin Bell. Billy is an isolated widower, sure, but when thrust into a crazy, chaotic situation, he chooses to be vulnerable, offering wisdom and healing. Let's look a little closer at the damage of a dominating father. In Barn Burning, Abner Snopes' cruel dominance absolutely shatters his young son, Sardi. Sardi just dreams of peace and stability, but Abner? He constantly instigates conflict, like intentionally ruining a wealthy man's rug and then literally setting barns on fire. Sardi is agonizingly torn between his own developing sense of morality and what Faulkner calls the pull of blood, that toxic loyalty his father demands. Abner is passing down a legacy of pure strife and trauma. Now, shifting back to our film example, we meet Nick Wolfe. Nick is a young father-to-be who is quite literally on the run from the law after committing an armed robbery. And why did he do it? Because he hired a private investigator to find the father who abandoned him, and he needed the cash to pay the guy. Nick is completely driven by the shame of feeling unwanted. He is terrified he's going to repeat his dad's mistakes. But everything changes when he breaks into the secluded cabin of Billy Ford to hide out. This collision of two desperate men brings us to Section 4, the power of reconciliation. Healing doesn't happen in isolation, guys. It happens through open, honest connection. As Nick is recovering from a gunshot wound in the cabin, he and Billy start to talk, and it's revealed that Billy carries his own immense burden of shame. He has an estranged son he's never even met. Billy has spent years practically paralyzed by this regret, unable to even leave his house, struggling to just write a simple letter of apology to his boy. Yet, in recognizing Nick's pain, Billy steps up. He acts as a paternal figure, patiently offering wisdom and even going so far as to call Nick's son. This open, honest connection, this vulnerability from an older, flawed man, completely changes Nick's trajectory. Billy's mentorship inspires Nick to face the music for his own actions. To prove to his unborn child what real responsibility looks like, Nick actually returns the stolen money. He gets ready to be arrested because he knows that overcoming past mistakes requires taking actual ownership of them. He flat out refuses to pass the legacy of running away down to his own kid. And that reconciliation ripples outward. Billy tragically passes away, but his legacy is finally secured. The film concludes by showing that Billy's actual son, Jim, receives his father's house and, way more importantly, the letter. Jim finally gets to read the words explaining his dad's regrets and his enduring love. Reconciliation is achieved, proving that it is literally never too late to try and make things right, even if the impact reaches beyond our own lifetime. Which brings us to Section 5, crafting your own legacy. How do we take these cinematic and literary lessons and actually apply them to our real, everyday lives? I absolutely love this insight from Lucid Books. They write, "There are certain stories only a father can tell. Writing down your memories, your struggles, and your triumphs bridges your lived experience with your children's future. It answers questions they might not even think to ask you for another 20 years. It shows them what faith, strength, and love look like when faced with adversity." Let's look at how this builds into actionable utility. A great resource called Story outlines several super low-maintenance ways to capture this history today. You can literally just open the voice memo app on your phone and start talking over a cup of coffee. You could put together a biography book using online services. You could record a Zoom call with your parents to capture their voices and facial expressions. Or if you want something tangible, go old school and exchange letters. The medium really doesn't matter. The act of connection is what counts. And hey, if you don't know where to start, here are some incredible legacy questions to spark that conversation. Ask your parents, what role did religion or faith play in your life? How did you decide on your career? What was your very first impression of your spouse? And, most importantly, what values do you wish to pass on to your children? These aren't just interview questions, guys. They're keys to unlocking the vault of your family's history. We've seen how shame can destroy families, but we've also seen how vulnerability and connection can heal them. So I'll leave you with this provocative thought. Knowing what you know now about the weight of your choices, will you reach out to your father, your mother, or your children today? Take action. Step past the shame, start the conversation, and intentionally build a legacy that will bless generations to come. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.